side are
10 before the hour now. Thanks for joining us for Storm Watch, sponsored this time by Nationwide Insurance. Before we take a look at the flooding rain in the Ohio Valley and the severe storms now, Ohio and Missouri, take a look at the tropics, and out there in the Pacific, we still have Tropical Storm Blas at 18.4 north and 124.5 west. Moving west at 12 out to sea, maximum sustained winds at 50 miles an hour. The bottom line is Blas has encountered cooler ocean water and is steadily weakening offshore. Now to the Atlantic side, the favored areas in June: Gulf of Mexico, Western Caribbean. How about next month? Well, things expand a little bit with another climatologically favored spot. The ocean waters near the Bahamas, east of Florida. And out here close to the islands and into the tropical South Atlantic, this is another area where development can be expected at times in July. Now, the first 10 days of July over the last 100 and something years since 1886 featured only 20 named storms. So June and July, as we've been mentioning, start fairly slowly, but towards the end of July, the last 10 days of the month since 1886, 37 named storms develop. So you can get to see a little bit of a trend there, that as we head into late July and then into August and September, that's when the hurricane season features its peak intensity, if you will, and the mid-September is typically the peak of the hurricane season. Out there this morning, very little happening. In the Gulf, we've watched disturbed weather for the last week or so, but what it's basically done is brought some beneficial rains to the coastal sections of Texas. About 2.5 inches of rain yesterday at Beaumont and Galveston, and up to 8 inches of precipitation in the last 2 or 3 days in Cameron Parish in Louisiana. We expect this system not to show any signs of development. There's no surface low pressure, anything like that. So again, the main effects as it drifts slowly west will bring some cooling rains to the interior of South Texas, possibly to San Antonio and to Austin, a couple places that have had very, very little precipitation in the last couple of months. Right now, though, the main area of rainfall is near Houston and Galveston, and it's mainly just very, very light. Out here in the Caribbean, here's Cuba, Puerto Rico, Central America, a lot of cloud cover, spotty storms. No organization. Notice the upper level cloud cover, the cirrus clouds, are streaming west to east, depicting the shearing mechanism in the upper level. So we have westerly winds and basically a hostile environment for tropical systems. So the bottom line is things are all quiet basically, except for Blas on the Pacific side. With that in mind, back to the states. A big blow up of thunderstorms late yesterday and last night from Kansas to Ohio and the mid-Atlantic. Now this morning the storms are weakening, but we still have a couple of portions of severe thunderstorm watches in effect from northeast Kansas near Topeka over into Ohio, including Xenia, Dayton, Columbus, and Cincinnati. Radar for you this morning. More heavy storms in areas that have just been inundated with extremely heavy rain lately. Southeast Ohio, western West Virginia, more heavy downpours in Indiana, parts of Illinois and Missouri too. The heaviest of the heavy storms right down near the Ohio River, parts of east central Ohio near Canton Akron and Youngstown, over in Indiana, west of Indianapolis, up towards Lafayette, south of South Bend. Strong thunderstorm cells there drifting on to the east. St. Louis, northeast and northwest of you, strong storms. And around Kansas City, there's a light show going on this morning as you have frequent lightning activity and lots of rumbles of thunder. Lightning data shows the clusters of intense lightning in this region. Now what we have on the weather map is a stalled out front right here. And there's very humid air coming up from the south, somewhat cooler and drier air to the north, and upper level energy coming in from the west. And it's going to be another day of severe activity from the Missouri Valley, mid-Mississippi Valley region to the Ohio Valley. And then the outlook for tomorrow has this area shifting into the northeast and mid-Atlantic. And Tuesday may be a very volatile day from Virginia and the Carolinas all the way to Maine. But today, it's late in the day.
It's time now for Storm Watch, and I want to make you aware of a dangerous situation happening now in Nebraska, as we do have a tornado warning that is in effect for several counties here: Knox, Cedar, and northern Pierce County in northern Nebraska due to this cell right here. Doppler radar has indicated a tornado within this cell, and we have had reports of 80-mile-an-hour wind gusts, trees being down. Watch out if you are in the path of the storm. Some of the cities do include McLean and also Randolph, as this is moving off to the east-southeast at 40 miles an hour. Again, a tornado warning in effect for Knox, Cedar, and northern Pierce County. The possible tornado is now being detected about 32 miles south-southwest of Yankton, or 8 miles northwest of Osmond, moving off to the southeast. You need to head to the lower level of your home if you are in the path of the storm. Watch out in Sioux City as it is moving off to the east. Okay, after that, we need to take a look at the tropics and see what has been happening, as we will be following this throughout the tropical season through November. We have been watching a cluster of storms here in the Caribbean, an area that is climatologically favored for formation, and we do have high pressure aloft, and that also is a condition that is conducive for formation of tropical storms and possibly hurricanes. A cluster of thunderstorms now beginning to brew underneath that. It is fairly close to land. Some of the forecast models would put it over land and cause that to dissipate. Other ones that we study maybe move it a little bit farther to the north, and so we are going to be studying this very closely. This is an area that will be watched by our hurricane experts in the next 24 to 48 hours. In the past 24 and 48 hours, we have been watching the Gulf of Mexico with a tropical disturbance, bringing in some moisture to Houston and also in Galveston. It's fizzling out now, no chance of any further formation with it, just bringing in a few showers to Houston, and some thunderstorms now begin to pop up in and around the San Antonio area as well as Austin. You're very dry there. You need this rain, and it looks like some rain is going to be heading your way. Isolated areas could see up to another inch. Yesterday, Galveston received 8 inches of rainfall. In the month of June, we typically look to the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean for formation of tropical storms. As we head into July, the area comes a little bit farther off to the east, heading into the intertropical convergence zone along the Atlantic and farther into the Caribbean. As we have been studying the area, we have watched several tropical waves move across, but at this point, no chance of any formation, and we are seeing fairly strong winds moving at the mid and upper levels, and that would be inhibiting anything to develop here. Although showers developing with a tropical wave in the Dominican Republic and also in Puerto Rico for today. We also have been watching kind of a ball of convection here on the tail of an old front that is out into the Atlantic. It's pretty small at this point, a very slim possibility of it developing any further, but it's another area that we'll keep an eye on. We have been keeping an eye on Tropical Storm Blas in the past several days, which was a hurricane, now continues to weaken with its maximum sustained winds down to 45 miles an hour, also continuing to move off to the west, now at 13 miles an hour. As Blas moves over cooler water, still looking at the convection dying down, and we're looking for that to be downgraded to a depression within the next 12 hours. We are seeing these strong storms fire up in the country, and they have been causing severe weather and also flooding conditions. Two big stories that we have been covering throughout the day today. First, we'll look at flooding, and we have flood watches in effect for central Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, also in West Virginia. We have flood warnings in many of these areas as roads have been shut down or washed away, and we've also seen evacuations and, unfortunately, people killed in some of the flood waters in Ohio and West Virginia. We have been seeing the rain come down this morning in St. Louis. It's been heavy at times, dying down a bit now, but look for more showers and thunderstorms to develop this afternoon. We have flood warnings in effect now for Kentucky, as well, as some areas have received about an inch of rain in just the past hour. And also severe weather now moving through Ohio with a severe thunderstorm warning in effect for Stark County. Winds here have been gusting up to 50 and 60 miles an hour. The heavy rainfall right along a stationary front that is parked over the Ohio River Valley. Some areas have received up to 7 and 8 inches of rain in the past 24 hours. In Owens County in Indiana, just to the south of Indianapolis, you received a foot of rain in about 6 hours, and needless to say, you have been flooded out as well. Here's what we expect as far as precipitation for today, with more heavy rain in Ohio, possibly up to an inch falling from Cincinnati to Columbus, also over toward...
To let him try and crawl out of what he did.
How do you know he didn't have a good reason?
Because I know Anders.
for joining us for this edition of Storm Watch. We're going to update you on the tropical weather, but first we take you to the trouble spots in the Midwest where things have been very hectic weather-wise, to say the least, at this hour. You may recall the past couple of days we have had a weather pattern that has repeatedly brought us rain showers, thunderstorms, and yes, even tornadoes. Now we are looking at an area that is going to be affected this hour that extends across much of the central areas of Illinois. These thunderstorms a little earlier did push through the Des Moines area and the tri-state area between Iowa, northern Missouri, and Illinois. And it's a lineup of thunderstorms, and they do have a severe history. Many of the thunderstorms have been associated with tornadic activity. That means that the Doppler is indicating that there are circulations in our atmosphere indicating that it may be a tornado. Now, when we start seeing these reports being more confirmed, we'll be a little bit more specific about where the damage has actually occurred. But for right now, just keep in mind that we do have tornado watches in effect for 2/3 north of Illinois. We're also looking at the area between Illinois, Iowa, and Missouri, and also extending back towards Nebraska and parts of Kansas. I'll tell you a little bit about the scenario for the setup here. We have a frontal boundary. This frontal boundary is getting a lot of moisture from the south that's getting pushed above the boundary here, and this further is destabilized. The atmosphere is further destabilized by the disturbances that come along the frontal boundary, and that's what we've been experiencing the past couple of days. We've had a couple of frontal boundaries just kind of sitting across the Midwest and the Corn Belt in the Ohio Valley. And so in addition to the possibility of tornadoes, the possibility of severe thunderstorms, we are also looking at a wide area of flooding from Illinois into Ohio. It's just a big problem, and eventually we're going to see a lot of this moisture push into the high country of upstate New York and Vermont. And here too, in New Hampshire, Vermont, and upstate New York, we have had problems with flooding all along the same old frontal boundary. What we are not seeing is the rain showers reach a little further to the south. And you'll notice that this area kind of blowing up here, this mesoscale area, when we start seeing this, a well-defined area of convection, it can last overnight. A lot of times, you know, we get the thunderstorms, they kind of subside after the sun is set. Well, we are not expecting that to occur with this lineup. You'll notice how it extends just to the south. This is Rockford, Illinois, right around in here, and you'll notice that it swings all the way down the extreme western southern areas of Illinois. It's going to be pushing to the east, southeast. So the central areas and around Peoria, Springfield, you're going to be under the gun. And you should start thinking right now what you're going to do in the event some of these thunderstorms that have the possibility of producing tornadoes come into your area. You'll want to seek shelter in the lower room of your home, preferably the basement. And if that's not available to you, you don't have a basement, try calling up the neighbor and say, hey, I'm coming over. The thunderstorms are coming our way. Don't wait till the last minute. Let's take a closer look. I want to point out right now, Peoria, the thunderstorms are knocking on your door. This was going to last for a little while. You'll notice that the thunderstorms are pulling to the east, but it's a rather wide as well long line of thunderstorms coming your way. If you're headed out towards Rockford, some thunderstorms coming your way too. They could possibly intensify. Eventually, Chicago, it does look like you'll be seeing these thunderstorms as we head into the early evening hours. St. Louis, it does look like tonight we may see these thunderstorms occur in your vicinity. We have had a number of thunderstorms to push through Omaha down towards Lincoln, and we're seeing another round.
Welcome to Storm Watch. Quite active in the Midwest this evening and through early this morning. So over the next several hours, it looks like a chance of not only severe thunderstorms, but tornadoes. That's what these red boxes indicate, that the atmosphere is conducive to the development of tornadoes covering Indianapolis, getting into St. Louis and Kansas City. And this is just added not long ago to the east of these tornado watches. We have a severe thunderstorm watch, which means that conditions are ripe for the development of severe thunderstorms, including Toledo, getting into Dayton, Ohio, and in the a good chunk of central and eastern Kentucky. Let's find out why. Well, this frontal boundary has a lot to do with it. This is an area of converging winds, and in this flow here, we've got upper air disturbances, one after another. Those are the two main ingredients that you need for thunderstorms. Upper air disturbances, if you will, positive vorticity is what it's called, positive vorticity, in addition to hot air, warm, light, hot air. Those two factors are probably the two major factors in the development of storms, and that's what we've got at play right here, right in this area. And look what it's wrought. Major severe thunderstorms had a major bow echo, if you will. That means the winds are so strong that they blew the thunderstorms forward, created a bow, the thunderstorms themselves. So this is our area of concern right here of severe weather, and you can see right now we've got, this was the bow echo earlier. It's moved toward the southeast. It was to the south of Chicago. Heavy rainfall, lightning, and you can see the severe weather across the Indianapolis area. And right here is an area of concern. Right there we've got this just in, a tornado warning for Montgomery County, Missouri. That's to the north of St. Louis. And a tornado was indicated by Doppler radar. This was just about 10-11 minutes ago, 2 miles northwest of Wellsville, Missouri, moving toward the southeast at 30 miles per hour. So locations in the path of this tornado could very well be Wellsville, Montgomery City, and Middleton. Take cover immediately. Tornado indicated in that thunderstorm right there. Let's go a little bit closer up in Indiana, first of all, and you can see torrential rains coming down. And of course, with already saturated grounds, we're looking at more flooding. We already have flood watches in effect, in addition to the gusty winds. In fact, Indianapolis Power and Light Company, just a little while ago, we got a statement, reported a 74-mile-per-hour wind gust. And at the airport, there was a 61-mile-per-hour wind gust reported. So we've got very serious winds, lightning. So you don't want to be out in this type of weather, and you want to avoid the low dips in the roads. You can see another perspective here coming out of Illinois, the wet weather. And there's that thunderstorm complex that's produced the tornado warning in Montgomery County in Missouri, moving toward the southeast at 30, traveling northwestward out of St. Louis. St. Louis not advised at this hour. Also thunderstorms firing up across Kansas, eastern Kansas, and getting into Kansas City. So the two biggest cities in Missouri being threatened with severe weather here. It's actually in Kansas City now, moving toward the southeast as well. Lightning, gusty winds, a possibility here, and we could see tornadic activity, and that the tornado watch covers the Kansas City area. Flooding is a concern right there. Of course, we've already seen saturated grounds from the previous rainfall, and with the additional rains, more flooding likely, if not imminent. Well, now it's time for your tropical update. It is still quiet in the Atlantic Basin, the Caribbean, and getting into the Gulf of Mexico. But there are some possibilities with this wave right here. We do have a cyclonic flow here, and we do have cyclonic flow here. But right in here, we could see enough development for this to gain momentum as it moves toward the north. And the upper level winds, it doesn't look like right now, will be unfavorable, the positioning of the cyclonic flow aloft. But you can see the westerlies right here. So these are pretty strong in terms of storms coming off of Africa. There's a look at the storminess here. We're going to be watching this carefully in terms of development. No organization now, but we're going to keep an eye on this in the Western Caribbean. And you can see this moisture. This is the remnants of that old disturbance still bringing rain to Texas. And here is Tropical Storm Blas as of 2 o'clock Pacific time. Winds now down to 40 miles per hour, moving toward the west at 13. You can see weakening considerably.
Thunderstorms raise flood levels in the
Welcome to Storm Watch, and what an active night it's been, and it's going to continue to be active going into tomorrow along a frontal boundary where we have not only a severe thunderstorm watch box, but also tornado watches, which remain in effect, covering just about along that I-70 corridor between St. Louis and Kansas City, getting into Kansas, and also around Paducah, Kentucky, Carbondale, Illinois. So please be careful in these areas because we've got a lot of hot air coming up from the south. We've got upper air disturbances coming in from the north, and where they're meeting along a frontal boundary, we've got severe weather. There's a look at the frontal boundary here, and just ahead of these disturbances often we'll see the greatest lifting of this unstable air, and that's why we're looking at the thunderstorms right through tonight for many locales. In fact, look at these explosions here. The red means very high cloud tops, cold cloud tops, and that means these thunderstorm tops are reaching high into the atmosphere, which indicates strength, which indicates severity in many instances. So it's right here across Missouri, getting into the eastern part of, or the western part of the Midwest or the Ohio Valley, and these are generally moving toward the southeast. Now, the good news about these storms, or at least what's associated with the storms, are some cooler temperatures behind this. And so, and plus we have a reinforcement to the north, which is going to help in terms of the heat wave. But right now we're dealing with hail potential, lightning, as well as gusty winds, and the possibility of tornadoes. And there's a look at St. Louis, which is looking at more severe weather moving in. You see this as this travels toward the southeast, right towards St. Louis. Also, it looks like Indianapolis, some of the worst is over, but earlier the Indianapolis Power and Light Company recorded a 74 mile per hour wind gust, and at the airport a 61 mile per hour wind gust as these blew through. But right now, Toledo, Ohio, looks like some wet weather moving in all the way down into the western part of Ohio and getting into Louisville right now. Here's a close-up look. Cincinnati, it looks like some storms just passed you by, and the rain is still heavy in Louisville, but driving eastward, looks like toward Lexington, a messy one along I-75. There's a look at the radar out of Chicago. This is tapered off considerably, thankfully, and we are looking at St. Louis now, and it's just a mess outside, and it looks like you've got more on the way, because this is blowing toward the southeast, and as we look upstream toward the northwest, more thunderstorms headed right for St. Louis. So it's going to be one of those nights where the storms are going to continue to persist. Now, as we look at Kansas City, of course, you were seeing some rough weather not too long ago at all, earlier this evening. That has moved to your south, but some severe weather. Look at this monster thunderstorm cell here containing very heavy rainfall and potentially hail moving toward the southeast here. As we look at the big picture in terms of travel, there's a look at it. We have, besides this general flood watch in effect across much of the Ohio Valley, in central Ohio, flood warnings remain in effect. That means flash flooding is imminent because of the waterways are already swollen from the previous rains and the rains that are already in the Midwest. So please be careful here. Now it's time to turn our attention to the tropics. It's been rather inactive thus far this season. Of course, we haven't gotten into the heart of the Atlantic Basin's tropical storm hurricane season. And right now we see no development over the next 24 to 36 hours. We have a cyclonic flow right here aloft, which is generally unfavorable for development. But you see this wave here right now. We hold the possibility, if this makes it into the Gulf of Mexico here, the possibility where we've got some anticyclonic flow here, which anticyclonic flows are generally favorable for the development at the upper levels. Of course, tropical features are generally at the surface, but you need also favorable upper level winds so they're not sheared apart, torn apart. But of course, we're hoping that it stays undeveloped, but there's the hint of perhaps some organization. We'll keep an eye on it. Now, generally, of course, in the mid-latitudes, we have the westerlies. That's why we have these storms move from west to east. Well, these are the westerlies here in terms of affecting the tropics. And so any seedlings or disturbances that are trying to get going, any waves, don't really stand a chance of organizing because of these westerlies. You can see this convection here in the southwestern Caribbean, and this is what we're keeping our eye on right now. But right now, the upper level winds are a bit unfavorable. And as we take a look at the bigger picture, you can see that convection here. If it makes its way into the area where there's upper level high, we could see a shot at it. But right now, no major organization, none expected over the next 24 hours. Let's turn our attention right now to tropical depression Blas. It has been downgraded. Of course, Blas used to be a hurricane. Winds now around 35 miles per hour around the center of circulation, moving toward the west at 13 miles per hour. So a slow death taking place for Tropical Depression Blas as it's moving into colder waters. Now there's a look at Blas right here, of course looking considerably more ragged than it has over the past day or two, as you might expect. This is losing its identity considerably. And there's another look at it right there, moving out, and there's a look at Mexico. A lot of convection over land. Stay tuned for Weather Center. It's coming your way after your local forecast.